talk more about events in US politics. Donald Trump has once again asked the Supreme Court in the US to halt a sentencing that is due to take place in relation to himself later today. Neama Rahmani joins me, a Californian attorney with West Coast Trial Lawyers and a former federal prosecutor who has been following developments in this case. Neama, great to have you with us this morning. Thank you very much indeed for your time. What is the sentencing that we're talking about here?
Well, Trump will be sentenced in the New York hush money case, but the judge has already said that he's going to give him an unconditional discharge. That means there's really no sentence at all. No time, no prison, no home confinement, no fine, not even probation. But it's still important because Trump will finally be adjudicated a felon. The conviction isn't final until that judgment is entered. So Trump, of course, can go through the normal appeals that any criminal defendant can do, but he'll have to do so as a convicted felon. He did try to get the Supreme Court to step in and put the case on hold, but they just recently decided not to do so.
Neama, hold on. This was a case that when that verdict came in, there were experts suggesting that in theory this could lead to a custodial sentence, that Donald Trump could be sentenced to time in prison. How is it now the case that he's getting away without any punishment at all?
Well, in theory, he could have been sentenced, but it was very unlikely. Right. This was by far the least serious of all the 4 criminal cases. Yep. Under New York law, we're talking about Class E felonies, someone with no criminal history. So those are the least serious felonies under New York law, and there was an argument that these should have been misdemeanors. So practically, logistically, it's impossible to send a former president into prison with Secret Service protection. So He wasn't going to be sentenced to any time at all. But there was the possibility of maybe some home confinement or a fine, but that's not going to happen.
But why? How has he got away with this completely scot-free?
Well, one is the procedural difficulties. And look, and part of it's the judge in the case. Judge Juan Merchan was unwilling to sentence Trump or imprison him to any time, despite 10 willful violations of his gag order during the trial. He just didn't have the stomach for it. So the writing was on the wall.
Does this not make a mockery of the rule of law? If this had been somebody else who wasn't as wealthy, high profile, and as powerful as Donald Trump, they would have been punished, wouldn't they?
Of course, but we're really in uncharted legal waters. One is a current president can't really be prosecuted, so that's one of the arguments. This obviously was conduct that took place before he was president, but we know that, sometimes different rules apply to people who are rich and famous, and there's at least an argument, at least the American people didn't care about this case at all, because notwithstanding this conviction, Trump did better in 2024 than he did in 2020.
But that's not how the law was meant to work. People might not care about it. If the guy's been found to have been guilty of criminal charges, then there should be a punishment, in my view. I think most people, at least over this side of the Atlantic, will find that absolutely astonishing.
Well, there should be, but again, in terms of the nature of the charges, let's not forget the feds rejected this case. The previous district attorney in Manhattan, Cyrus Vance Jr., also rejected this case. So credit to Alvin Bragg for filing it and getting across the finish line, but ultimately he did so too late. By the time Trump was scheduled to be sentenced, he was already president-elect, and it didn't make any sense to give him any real punishment whatsoever.
If he'd lost the presidential election, if Kamala Harris was about to become the new president of the United States, do you think things in this case would have unfolded differently?
I do. There's no question. I think one of the reasons the judge is so hesitant to sentence Donald Trump is he's going to be president in 10 days. So what punishment can he possibly have? If you fine him and he decides not to pay it, there's nothing the judge can do. You can't put him on probation. That would be ludicrous to have him checking with a probation officer. And obviously, incarceration or confinement of any sort does not make sense when someone is president. So,
sure, that makes sense. Can he, just lastly, Neama, can he, and do you think will he, pardon himself as soon as he gets into office?
Well, he can, because in the United States, we have both a state and federal system. So he can pardon for federal crimes, but this is a state offense. So the only person that can pardon Donald Trump is the governor of New York. She's a Democrat. I don't think she's going to do that.
Seems unlikely, doesn't it? Neama, thank you for talking us through that. So clearly, Neama Rahmani, California attorney with West Coast Trial Lawyers and a